All right. So we are back at it again with our series previewing every single division in the NFL. We've picked every game one by one about 4 to 5 weeks ago now, and now we're up here to defend our takes. We get a little bit farther and farther away from it every week, so we kind of
Yeah.
get back to it, and it's like, oh shit, I'm a little bit stupid, but it's okay.
Yeah.
That's kind of what these predictions are about.
Oh yeah.
Just we'll get into it. We'll try to justify it this week. If you can't tell by the pennant above me, we're doing AFC South, both the home of the current Houston team and the former Houston Oilers, the Tennessee Titans. But we will get into our predictions, going through every team from last to first, starting in last. Who do you have in last, Simon?
Well, this one's not too controversial. I did not pull an Arizona Cardinals like I did last week, throwing them up to like 8-9 or whatever the record I had them. I have the Tennessee Titans, which I'm assuming you have as well. Not looking too good going into the season. They I don't know, man. There's a few bright spots. Like, I actually do think that they improved a lot at wide receiver, for example. Bringing in Calvin Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins are both huge additions. Tony Pollard as well. Like, their offense, honestly, Tyler Boyd wasn't there last year, was he? No, he wasn't.
No.
Yeah. Like, so
No,
they completely renewed their wide receiver core. So it's looking a lot better. Actually, you know what? Now I'm talking myself into a higher record than I have them. But
I know.
it doesn't look as bad on paper as my gut told me it was going to be. But
I do feel like the Titans are kind of the team that everybody just kind of assumes are going to be terrible going into the season. That's to be real. I also have them doing really bad.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, looking at the roster, I feel like you see a lot more bright spots than you thought. I mean, they're probably for a while has been receiver. Their defense isn't even half bad. I mean, particularly, as a biased Seahawks fan, I think
they're a bit
Quandre.
Yeah, they got L'Jarius Sneed. I forgot about that.
Yeah. Oh. They also have Jamal Adams, who, I mean, in Seattle, he wasn't great, had struggled in coverage, but he's also been very injured the last few years, so giving him a shot I don't think is a bad thing.
And if you want to look at it like this, on this depth chart, they have him as a backup. They still have Amani Hooker.
Exactly, yeah.
So it's not like he's going to be thrown into a spot.
If he doesn't work out, yeah. Exactly. So there is a lot of bright spots on this team. I think, offensive line you worry about a little bit, but they drafted well for that. J.C. Latham, I think, was a bit of a reach at where they were, but was still likely to be a solid tackle prospect. Absolute hulk of a man. But I think the biggest thing for me with this team is just, like, if I am to kind of defend my record prediction, I will say, some of the moves that they have made now, they didn't make when we made these record predictions.
True.
Like, they didn't add both former Seahawks safeties. That may have made me, bump it up a win or maybe two. Just looking at this more closely, I've been going 4-13, which is pretty rough. I do think they're a bit of a better team than that. I think they have a bit of a rough schedule, especially playing in this division, which I think is very good. They're not going to win very many of those games, even with this roster. But to kind of defend my take a little bit, I will say it does very much seem like a bit of a directionless team, and a lot of the additions they have kind of seem like they were just plugging holes because they could in free agency. I mean, like the Calvin Ridley thing, Tyler Boyd, Tony Pollard especially, after not having a great season with Dallas. And then you just look at quarterback is obviously a big question mark too. Will Levis played pretty good last year, but was it good enough to kind of take them to the next level? Who knows? Maybe their whole and the whole Mike Vrabel thing is kind of was a bit of a disaster too. So that also kind of takes my confidence in them a little bit, with how well he had done to just kind of tank him out of nowhere and hire a pretty unproven coach, in Brian Callahan. So there definitely are some bright spots, but I do kind of worry about the direction of the team a little bit. I wonder if what they're doing by adding all these veteran talents is to just test out Will Levis to say, we're going to build you the best offense roster that we possibly can in a short amount of time to just see what you can do with it. To see if you're actually the franchise quarterback. If you're not, none of these guys are huge weights on us. Like DeAndre Hopkins and Calvin Ridley are both getting, Hopkins especially, both getting up there in age. Like we can cut bait on a lot of these guys and not be too hurt by it. So maybe let's see if you can run this offense, and then if not, we'll rebuild. And if you can, maybe we can start looking to build something long term. Maybe that's their plan. Who knows? I could easily see it going both ways. I could see them having this 4-13 record that I have, but with some of the talent on this roster, I could also see them doing a bit better.
Yeah, fair enough. I got excited because I thought that me and you would both be in the shitter this week for having a fan base get mad at us, but I'm quickly realizing that it's going to be me whose people are going to get mad at really quick here because I was a lot meaner. I was a lot meaner. I had
4-13.
I had them winning the draft lottery and drafting first overall next year, which means that I had them at a record of 2-15.
That's pretty bad. I mean, there's no draft lottery in the NFL, so that means you have them as the worst team in the NFL.
Whatever. I don't care.
Wow. Now, I'll just leave it up to you to defend that opinion, Simon. Why do you think the Titans are the worst team in the NFL?
Well, you know, Caleb, I had a bit of insider information on the fact that Will Levis has done nothing this offseason but just fill his body with mayonnaise. Honestly, I don't necessarily agree with his workout habits. I think that he could be, working on it a bit more. We might be seeing a rubber arm when he comes back this season. I don't know if he has the incredible arm strength we once saw from him. And he's improving. With those two things, 2-15, sure, why not? I don't know, man. I had them go. I don't know. When I was making this, I just hated the Titans. Apparently,
they are a very forgettable team.
They are.
And I feel like it's kind of just Titans is a loss. To kind of back you up, I was looking through a lot of the losses that I had for them to just say I don't know. Where could 4-13 feels low. Where could I have given them a win? I don't know, man. It's good. A lot of this is really rough. The losses I have for them, the Bears on the road, yeah, that's rough. The Jets, Packers, Dolphins, Colts, Bills, Lions. Holy shit, that's rough.
That is rough.
Then I have them. They get on a good streak where they beat the Patriots, Chargers, lose to the Vikings, which that'd probably be a bit of a toss up.
And keep in mind they just lost the quarterback. What's his name?
Yeah, JJ McCarthy. Yeah, still I think that's a bit of a toss up. The Vikings have some talent around them. I just don't think both teams will be very good. I have them beating the Texans in an upset. I mean, you got to have a couple of those. But then you get back to some of these other games, and it's like Jags, Bengals, Colts, Jags again, Texans. Like, all of these teams that I have them losing to, except, like, the Vikings, are borderline playoff teams. And I don't see, I think they have a decent roster, but that's a pretty rough schedule. I don't see them winning a lot of those. Like, they'll get a couple upsets, like I have them here with the Texans, but... Yeah, I think it is a pretty rough schedule. The season is almost more of a referendum on Will Levis than anything.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I don't have much of a defense of my 2-15 pick. I don't think saying that they could win, get the first overall pick is that out of the question. They are still really bad. I think they're relying a lot on veterans to really step up here, and veterans that on other teams haven't really won. To just throw that out there as well. It's not like Calvin Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins, Quandre Diggs, Jamal Adams. It's not like any of them really have much playoff experience.
Don't disrespect Quandre Diggs and Jamal Adams. They're
what have they done in the playoffs, Caleb?
I mean, you can disrespect Jamal Adams a little bit. Don't disrespect Quandre though.
Fair enough.
That's my boy.
Yeah, fair enough. But either way, I don't know. A lot of the additions I think they made are really, really good, but it totally depends on how high you are on Will Levis, I guess. More than anything else. That's super important. Because if he has a breakout season this year, sky's the limit, honestly. Calvin Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins, Tyler Boyd, as guys you throw.
You could absolutely make that work.
That's not the worst offensive line I've seen in my life either.
No.
It could work. It could work. It could work, but
yeah, there's a lot of young talent on that offensive line.
Yep.
J.C. Latham, Peter Szyszkowski, Lloyd Cushenberry, Dylan Reduns. Like, those guys are all, like, from the last 2 to 3 drafts. Like,
I guess.
that's pretty nice. The one
Very
last thing
young.
I will say about the Titans before we move on, if they do have a Achilles heel other than Will Levis potentially not working out, it's their linebackers. It's pretty rough. Their secondary, I think, is actually really good, like we talked about.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Ubyssey and L'Jarius Sneed is great. Quandre Diggs and Amani Hooker is great. This linebacker core, oh my god, they're going to get gashed. Like, Arden Key, Kenneth Murray, Jack Gibbons. Harold Landry's pretty good. But, like, I don't necessarily love that. Jeffrey Simmons is always going to be good. But, yeah, their defense up the middle.
Joseph Day on the other side.
Joseph Day is good, too.
Yeah.
I think their defensive line is solid. I think their secondary actually looks really good. Linebackers, yeah, that might be what kills them in the end. So yeah, I think they're an interesting team. I think they could be a team with a lot of variance, but we both have them doing pretty poorly.
Yep. Do you want to give who you have in third? If we want to go that.
I
order?
will.
Sure.
Now, I will kind of, to transition it, I'll say the Titans, I think, have a worse record than their roster is, partially because of this division. I think all 3 teams ahead of the Titans could potentially make a run for the playoffs. And this team that I have in third just missed the playoffs. They are my 8th seed. So they are the one just out of the playoffs. And just like last year, continuing to not catch a break, I believe they did the exact same thing last year. That's the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Oh. That's not who I thought. Okay, wait a second. I need to switch up which team I brought up. All right, continue.
I am a lot... the Jags are so interesting to me because I look at this team and it was like a couple of years ago where they were the brand new like hot thing in the AFC South, right? Like they get Trevor Lawrence, they have that season, they go and beat the Chargers in that playoff game. It's like, okay, the Jags are up next. Like the pieces are coming together, everything's looking really good for them. And then last season, it's just kind of all fell apart. They had a good start to the season, but then they completely fell apart down the stretch, which is really scary. Like I've talked about this with the Eagles. This league really is a "what have you done for me lately" league. And what have they done for me lately? I believe they had, I'm pulling it up right now, they had an 8-3 start and then proceeded to lose 5 of their next 6 games, with their only win being against Carolina to miss the playoffs. That is not acceptable at all. If you're going to try to be a winning football team. And in terms of what they did in the offseason to change that, I mean, not a lot. They let Calvin Ridley get away, which was not necessarily a great move by them. They were going to replace him.
Yeah.
Brought in Gabe Davis, which is a bit of an overpay, if I'm going to be quite honest. He's not he is nowhere near the talent level of Calvin Ridley at this point. They brought in Brian Thomas, which is a move I like a lot more at receiver in the draft, but still a rookie, still unproven. And yeah, the rest of this roster is still very good. When I'm going to put it up against the Colts and I'm going to put it up against the Texans, I just don't necessarily think that this is the team that's going to come out on top. This defense still looks... I like adding Eric Armstead to that defense is fantastic. Obviously, Josh Allen, now Josh Hines Allen, is fantastic as always. The rest of this defense is pretty good, but I mean, the secondary isn't awe-inspiring. Linebackers aren't exactly awe-inspiring. I don't know. The big thing for me is how they performed at the end of the season and the ascension of both the Colts and Texans. I'll talk more about the Colts and Texans in a bit, but I think those teams, more than anything, are going to be what keeps the Jags out of the playoffs. I have them going 10-7 still. I feel like I'm doing a lot of justifying to say why they're not as good, but I still have them having a pretty good record because I think this is a good roster. It's just there's something up with them, and they need a pretty dramatic course correct in the right direction, and they just kind of tinkered a little bit. That's kind of my view on the Jags. I don't know. I assume based on your reaction, you have them higher than third. What's your placement and record for them?
The funny thing is, I have the same record for you as them.
Okay.
But I have them in second. I have them going 10-7 in the second slot in my division. I don't know. I think they're going to be pretty good. I also think that you're higher on the Colts than I am. I will throw that in there, just to add an addition. And I think that's pretty incredibly obvious now. So I honestly think the more interesting conversation from here is to talk about the Colts, because I don't even disagree with any of the things that you really said about the Jags. I still think they're good enough to go 10-7. I actually like a lot of the additions they made. I think Gabe Davis is really good. I wasn't thinking about the money when it came to him, so I don't really have a comment on that. I don't remember how much they paid him, but I think he's a good receiver. I don't think he's a bad replacement. I think that I don't know. I still think they have a pretty elite offense for the most part. I think Travis Etienne is still going to do his type of thing. Trevor Lawrence proved in the first half of last year that he can be a top quarterback in this league with the right weapons. And I think for the most part, he has them. He has them here. And if it just comes down to their one big thing that could potentially bring this like offense apart being consistency, like if they get that together and we see what did you say, 5-3 for the first 8 games? Like if we see that again.
Simon, they were 8-3 for the first 3 games and then lost 5 out of the last 6.
I understand that, but it's a new season. If we're this, and I'm just looking at this roster on paper, we're judging it on paper. I don't know. I still think they are somewhat easily still the second best team in this division.
I mean, we can get into an argument about the Colts in a second here, but I will just say I still feel like the combined talent. I mean, we don't really know how Brian Thomas is going to do, but I feel like losing Calvin Ridley is a bit of a big deal. Like I don't know. Sure. Gabe Davis is nowhere near the level of Calvin Ridley. I think the Gabe Davis thing was a desperation move because they weren't able to get Calvin Ridley. They wanted him back, and they got beat to him by a division rival. That's kind of like enough. Instinctual, just like, oh shit, decision making. That's what like bad teams do. That's what the bad teams do. And the Jags are doing that. I'm not saying they're a bad team, but I think that's a stupid move. I think that we did one of the best and worst free agent signings in the NHL. If I was going to do best and worst free agent signings in the NFL, Gabe Davis would easily be among the worst, in my opinion.
Okay. What would you have done in their situation? You get a guy stolen like that. How would you have looked going into the season? What would you have done instead? Because I don't think they would have. Do you think they would have been able to get Gabe Davis cheaper, or do you think it literally was just a panic? Here's a bag, come over here.
I don't know if they were going to be able to get him cheaper. I think the thing is, like, if you're willing to pay that much money to Gabe Davis, you needed to go in further for Calvin Ridley. I think you could have. Okay. I think it's the kind of thing where like they had the ability to, and they should have, in my opinion. Because if you're going into the season with the receiver core instead of it being like Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas, I'm a lot more confident with it being Calvin Ridley and Brian Thomas. It's still a little bit nitpicky. Again, I do think our main difference here is just in terms of where we have the Colts and how good we think the Colts are.
We're arguing about a team that we both have 10-7.
That we both have 10-7. But I do think just attitude-wise, I'm a bit more pessimistic on them than you are, even if I have them going 10-7. Like, I think your 10-7 is very much a question probably. Did they make the playoffs? For you.
Good question. Let me check. Yes, they do make the playoffs. They make it as the 5th seed, actually, which is pretty high for a team, which is interesting. But
yeah,
I'm calling my own list interesting because I haven't looked at it in 2 weeks. But
But yeah, you're just to continue that line of thought. I think your 10-7 is a much more optimistic 10-7, where like the Jags fans will finish that season and be like, oh yeah, look, we're doing good, we're going into the playoffs, this feels good. My 10-7, when they miss the playoffs, it's like, does Doug Peterson get fired? You know, like that kind of thing. I think it's just an attitude difference.
Okay. Well, and that attitude is completely related to whether or not they make the playoffs. It completely comes down to that, right?
Yeah.
10-7
and that's
still
because
isn't terrific.
Of the competition
I don't think it's the ceiling. I don't think it's the ceiling of this team, truthfully. Like when you have a
I
quarterback like
so
Trevor
either.
Lawrence, again, I've said it all once already about the Titans, but I'll use the same phrase: "Sky's the limit." Like when you have a quarterback like that, it's just whether the parts around him can work.
Yeah. All right. Do we want to talk
here?
about the Colts?
Yeah, let's talk about the Colts. I was pretty tough on them.
I'm curious.
I was pretty tough on them, to be honest with you. I think I was overly tough on them, and I will apologize now before I immediately go into my rant on why I believe this should be correct, despite not actually believing it. All right, you all ready to go? Here we go. Anthony Richardson is a bust. He's going to get hurt in the first week. Jonathan Taylor is overrated. Michael Pittman Jr. isn't a number one wide receiver. Their offensive line is bad. Quentin Nelson doesn't know what he's doing anymore. He's old. Their defense doesn't work. DeForest Buckner is a name I haven't heard in 3 years. Let's see. Who the hell is Julian Blackmon? Nick Cross sucks. Kenny Moore isn't actually that good of a quarterback, and I have them going 6-11. Rebuttal?
You're going 6-11?
Rebuttal?
That's got to be the stupidest. That's got to be the stupidest take you've made all summer. I'm sorry. So you have them going 6-11. Let me double check this, but I'm pretty sure
that is quite the drop off.
I have them going. Take your record, flip it. I have them going 11-6.
Oh wow, that's probably the biggest difference we've had all year.
Yes, I think so.
Oh.
I think so. Can I get into why I think your prediction is stupid?
Okay,
so first of all, I think you can just make a very basic argument for this without having to say too much by just saying this roster, after not changing very much, like this roster is pretty much the same as it was last year. That roster came a play away from beating everybody's darling, the Texans, to take that division and make the playoffs with Gardner Minshew at QB. After we already
I would argue that Gardner Minshew carried him. Have you heard these Raiders fans? Do you not know how good Gardner Minshew is? That man is a generational talent, and they let him walk.
Okay.
Can you believe that?
We all know how I feel about Raiders fans. So I'll just they stopped watching. They saw a video longer than 30 minutes and just were like, oh, I need my little like 60-second shorts because my attention span isn't that long. But no, I don't think Gardner Minshew is God incarnate like most of Raiders Nation does. I think he's actually pretty not great. I mean, the whole thing with Gardner Minshew is he plays very chaotic, and sometimes that will be chaotic good, and sometimes that will be chaotic bad. And so you just kind of have to live by the sword and die by the sword.
So you're saying he's a gunslinger? Just like the gunslinger Brett Favre. They just let Brett Favre walk into free agency like that. Okay. Like a prime Brett Favre just walked and left this team. Caleb, do you realize how stupid of a take you're making right now? Sure. You are saying that this Indianapolis Colts team would be worse without Brett Favre. That's pretty much what you're saying. So honestly,
Gardner Minshew, sure. Gardner Minshew is Brett Favre, but if it was just the play where he threw that stupid interception in the NFC Championship again and again and again, that's a little harsh on Gardner Minshew. But Anthony Richardson is much better, significantly better. I think they even upgraded that backup quarterback as well. Like, I think their second quarterback is still better than Gardner Minshew and Joe Flacco. So they look a lot better at quarterback now. So yeah, I just think, to Raiders fans and your argument aside, that Gardner Minshew is Jesus Christ. which Raiders fans sound off in the comments if you can count to 5.
Stand with me.
I'm being a bit mean.
Stand with me, Raiders fans. Hold the line.
But no, I don't think Gardner Minshew was that good. I think he did enough to get them to the playoffs. I think it was an impressive season, all things considered. But I think Anthony Richardson is a significant improvement, and they didn't really need a significant improvement to make the playoffs last year. Gardner Minshew, for as much as I can joke around and shit on him, was not the reason they missed the playoffs. It was just a dropped pass. If they get that first down in the last game against the Texans, they probably make the playoffs. And so that is combined with the fact that they did a really good job in free agency keeping everybody around, re-signing Michael Pittman, and keeping a whole bunch of other key pieces intact. And then they had a fantastic draft. I love their draft. Getting Kwity Paye as they got the top defensive player in the class. They drafted the first defensive player off the board in the draft. So they got their choice of who they thought the best defensive player in the class was. And they took Kwity Paye, who has been, I think it was between him and Dallas Turner for the top edge rusher in the class. So that's going to be a huge improvement on that front.
I don't think you got the right name. Kwity Paye.
No, I have the right name.
Are you talking about
Laiatu
Latu?
Laiatu Latu.
Yeah, okay. Don't worry about it. I would have made the same mistake, but I was sitting there like, I don't know why I'm Kwity Paye in Madden 2 years ago. I was trying to figure out if I was stupid.
This is a result. This is a result of me getting old and being like, oh yeah, Kwity Paye was drafted like last year. I remember him getting drafted.
I know what you mean.
No, it's like
Johnny Gaudreau's going into year 12 in the NHL. I know what you mean.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's Laiatu Latu. That's why it makes sense why it doesn't click in my head. Yeah, Laiatu Latu, great player. The only reason why he wasn't even higher on people's draft boards was because of the injury concerns. I think he's going to be a great player. The fact that he's sitting behind Kwity Paye, so he's on this depth chart, just shows how deep they are at that position, which I think is awesome. Which just adds to an already really good defense. I think linebackers look great, especially with Zaire Franklin in the middle. As much as you say he sucks, I think Julian Blackman is great at safety. This just is a really solid team overall. Getting A.D. Mitchell in the second round is a steal. This Colts team is really good. I think they're really underrated by people who didn't really pay attention to them last year. I think if you look at their season last year, look at their coaching staff, especially with how much they were able to elevate this roster, they're being given a better roster this year with a much better quarterback. The sky is really the limit, and even though I have them finishing second in the division, I would not be shocked if they beat the Texans for the number 1 spot. That would make a lot of sense to me. I also have them making the playoffs. They are my 6th seed.
Gotcha. All right. You know what my favorite part about doing this segment every week is? I get to do my Stephen A. Smith impression. It's the best part. Honestly, I don't even disagree with you on a lot of the things you said. I don't know if I'd have them going... I don't know if I'd have them with 11 wins. If I were to give them just like looking at their roster right now, it's a 1-win difference, but they feel like a 10-7 team. Which would have them being around the same spot as the Jaguars, because I don't feel like they're much worse or much better than the Jags. I think they're pretty much on the same level.
I don't think a 1-win difference is that big, like you pointed out yourselves. I don't think the talent gap is that much better.
I think you have them... I'm guessing... What... Do you see a world where they win 12 games? Like, I feel like you have them at their ceiling. If not close to it.
I could see a world where they win 12, but that would be my ceiling for them. I wouldn't see them going past that. Yeah, that's understandable.
Yeah.
I think, I do think a big thing that I didn't mention as much is just the coaching staff. I think I have a lot more confidence in the Colts coaching staff with Shane Steichen to be creative and innovative than I do with Doug Peterson's staff in Jacksonville. Not because of Doug Peterson necessarily, because I think he's a good coach, but I think some of the coordinators in Jacksonville aren't necessarily the best. That gives me a lot more confidence in Indianapolis to be a bit more cutting edge. Again, I do think it's just simple math, though, in terms of they had 9 wins last year with an infinitely worse quarterback situation, and now they've improved a lot in the draft and kept the roster basically the same. 11 wins makes a lot of sense to me.
No, I can understand where you're coming from. And right now, if you were to walk up to me on the street, I'd probably give a similar, maybe a little bit less optimistic take, but still, like I don't think we're actually that far off on where we have the Colts. It's just
Okay.
Past Simon didn't like the Colts. So in other words, Colts fans, go yell at me in the comment section of the first video that we did on this topic. On like the segments. Go yell it because I deserve it back then, but now I didn't do it. It's not me. You got the wrong guy. All right. Should we talk about the Houston Texans? You want to do that?
Yep.
Okay, let's do it.
Sure.
Honestly, I think the Texans did a lot of the same things that I feel like the Titans did, but better. In a lot of ways, they added a lot of veterans to a fairly young team. They added a lot of guys who could potentially, at their ceilings, be better than the guys they have in the slots to follow them up. But if those guys don't quite work out, they have the depth to still be a very, very good team. I think they're going to be even better than they were last year, and they were very good last year. I think additions like Stephon Diggs, I know a lot of people have criticized it just on the fact that he did have a down year, but I still think I think my opinion on it would be that I still think he's a number 1 wide receiver. I think both Nico Collins and Tank Dell are both incredible young receivers in their own right. So I think they probably have one of the best wide receiver groups in the NFL right now. And with CJ Stroud leading that, Joe Mixon at running back, Dameon Pierce backing him up. Like, they just have an incredible offense this year. Laramie Tunzel, Kenyon Green, Shaq Mason. Like, that's a really good offensive line, too. So, I mean, and defensively adding Daniil. Okay,
Daniil.
I don't know why I had a brain cramp on that. Daniil Hunter. Adding him is huge as well. Like, there's a lot of pieces to this defense that I think is going to be really huge for them going into this season. I don't know. I'll give what I have them as their record. That made sense. I have them going 12-5, and I feel like that's actually low for them. I feel like they could totally do something crazy and go 13, maybe 14 wins. But I think 13 wins isn't that out of the question for them. Honestly, I feel like I could see a world where they win more than 12 games because they're going to be really good. Like, assuming CJ Stroud doesn't have some sort of sophomore slump, like they have all the pieces.
Yeah. And I mean, I pretty much agree with everything you said. I have them at the exact same record, at 12-5. I think I'm maybe a slight tick less optimistic, because I think they're very much we won the offseason team, and I feel like those teams are a little bit overhyped going into the year. But I think it's not as dramatic of an overhype as some of the teams in the past have been. I still think they are really good. I think 13 wins is their ceiling. Like, I don't think it's out of the possibility, but everything would kind of have to go right for that. CJ Stroud had about as good of a rookie year as you could possibly ask for. So you have pretty much no doubts at the quarterback position. Everything else you said about their roster, I'll back up in terms of how deep and talented they are, both on offense and defense. The one thing I will say is just focusing on that depth. Like, you talked about it being one of the best receiver rooms in the league. I don't necessarily disagree. I think that starting 3 of Diggs, Collins, and Dell, if Diggs plays up to even like 80% of what he's been at his peak, then absolutely that's one of the best receiver trios in the league. But I look even more and say, oh my God, this receiver room is so deep. Their 7th receiver, aka probably not even going to make the roster, is Ben Skoranek, who, as a Seahawks fan, I know has been a very good role player on the Rams for the last few years. So to have him as your 7th receiver is absolutely crazy. Even going back further, their what is that? 8, 9, 10, 11th receiver is Quintus Cephas, who, I mean, is not like the best receiver of all time, but was getting decent starting time on some of those old Lions teams. Like,
Yeah.
That's an incredible receiver room. And yeah, that kind of goes for the rest of this roster, honestly. Like, even on defense, I'm looking at this and saying, like, you have Derek Barnett as a backup. That's pretty impressive. In the second, like, Alziza Shalir starting at linebacker is amazing. Their secondary is pretty good, too. I like the moves of taking on both C.J. Henderson and Jeff Okudah, 2 former draft busts, but if you can get something out of them, they obviously have a lot of talent. Yeah, this roster is just, like, it's crazy how well it's come together, and that's props to Nick Caserio. Like, I think this is one of the most well-assembled rosters in the NFL, and I would be pretty surprised if they didn't translate that into a deep playoff run. I have them as the second seed behind only the Bengals in my total AFC standings.
Did you just spoil? No, you didn't. We did that. We did that division already. So you didn't spoil.
We did the AFC North.
Okay. I have them in second as well, but I don't believe we've talked about the division that I have the first team coming out of yet. So I don't think.
So it's an AFC East team.
Yes. Are they the only division we haven't done? Yep.
Correct.
Yep. So yeah, it is an AFC East team.
Well, there we go.
It's the Patriots. They go 17-0. Drake May forever. It's the only hint I'll give you. All right.
I mean, if you want to give your updated playoff standings as a whole, you don't have your number 1 team, but what else do you have for the AFC that's going to take in shape?
Second. Yeah. Actually, I can. Well, no, I won't say that. Although you're going to figure it out really quick what I'm missing. But I have my second team being the Texans. My third team is the Ravens. Fourth is the Chiefs. Fifth is the Jaguars. Sixth is the Bengals. And seventh is the Steelers.
All right.
So there you go.
I have the Bengals in first, 14-3. I have the Texans in second at 12-5. The Chiefs in third, also at 12-5. My mystery team is in fourth.
Okay.
Then I have the Ravens at 12-5 in fifth, the Colts at 11-6 in sixth, and another mystery team in seventh.
Wow.
Taking the last
so you
one.
have. All right. So me and you are going to have a bit different looking. What is it? AFC East? Yeah, AFC East.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to have a bit different AFC East because I believe I only have 1 mystery team. You have 3, which means that
I have 2.
You have 2.
I have 2.
Oh, so you only have 2 teams making. Never mind. I thought you had a 3-team division there making the playoffs. No. I only have 1, and it's my top team, which should tell you how good of a division this should be. So we'll get into that. Not next week. The week after.
Not next
Maybe
week.
Next week.
Which division are we doing? Maybe next week.
If we double them up. Yeah, if we double them up. But we don't know if we're going to do that. Well, yeah, we don't know if we're going to do that. We'll see how hefty of a week we have next week. But I
think we already know.
You know, the shitty thing. Oh, do we already know which one we're doing? Which one are we doing?
Well, I think because we said...
You know.
I do know. I think because we said we were going to do the NFC North last, we have a bit of a stinker next week because we're going to do the NFC South.
Right. Yeah. So maybe it wouldn't be a bad week to double them up. Maybe
no, honestly, come back next week for NFC South, but also AFC East, maybe.
Absolute stinker. It'll be an absolute
I'm doing
shit
a great
fest
job
of
at
an
selling
episode.
Yeah.
Don't come back next week if you want. Come back next week if you want to hear about us talk about how the Saints are gonna go. I don't know. I don't even know, man. They're gonna go
0-17.
Yeah, there we go. That if you do have them going 0-17, this would be the time to say it, because then they'd be a good conversation.
No, I unfortunately not, but I do.
It's gonna be like. It's gonna be just us going, yeah, you know, I got the Panthers going 7-9 or whatever, you know. It's
7-9.
No, I just mean there's going to be a lot of mid teams. That's not my prediction. I threw a random one out there, but like,
Okay.
it's just going to be us talking about mediocre teams doing mediocrely.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yep. Although with some of the new moves that we saw the Falcons make, it might be a bit more interesting.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, you know what segment's coming up next? We're talking about the Falcons, and they're doing things.